The mold in your home may just be the very reason you're getting sick. Looking back in history, the ancient Greeks were so aware of the dangers that they used to burn down houses with mold in them. This is my partner Andri. In 2021, we moved into our dream home in Portugal, only to realize we had to get out of there as fast as we could. The mold was so bad that it took only 8 days for Andri to get a severe form of mold toxicity. It then took 2 years for him to recover fully. That experience taught us just how important it is to clean mold whenever we see it. In this video, I'm going to show you how to clean mold, which products to use, and what to do if you have a full-blown mold infestation. Before we get into different cleaning strategies, you should know about the different types of mold that you may find in your home. Knowing your enemy is half the battle, but mold doesn't actually start out as an immediate threat. In fact, it's a necessary component of the natural environment because it actually decomposes organic matter. You're sure to find it in your backyard, soil, and plants, and anywhere else where there is moisture and oxygen. It can then get inside your home by drifting through your open windows, doors, vents, and air conditioning systems. It can also be carried in by attaching to your clothes or on the hair of your pets. It grows by spreading through tiny spores present in the air. When those land on areas with excessive moisture, like pipes, carpets, showers, wallpaper, or ceiling tiles, it often leads to a mold infestation. A mold infestation is the worst possible scenario, but I'll explain how to deal with that later in the video. Regarding the specific types of mold, we can break those down into 3 main categories: allergenic, pathogenic, and toxigenic. Allergenic molds aren't harmful to your health, but they tend to trigger allergic reactions in certain people. Pathogenic molds are less common but more harmful because they can trigger illnesses in people with a weakened immune system, including the elderly and children. Toxigenic molds tend to be the rarest, but they're definitely the most dangerous. They produce mycotoxins, which are responsible for causing severe health problems in people and pets, which can often actually be lethal. One of the worst toxigenic molds is black mold. Some molds are also completely harmless. The big problem, though, is that you can't tell them apart unless you use a microscope. Because of this, it's better to assume all mold is dangerous, especially if it's in your home. So, how do you stop it from getting there? Prevention is the best method to keep your home safe from mold, so that's why understanding how mold works is so important. Remember that mold grows where there is moisture. With this knowledge, the best way of preventing it from getting into your home is controlling the moisture levels. And here is how you can do this. The first method is the easiest, and it's something that you should always keep in mind wherever you live. You need to allow air to flow freely through your home. You can do this by simply opening doors and windows, and this is especially important in kitchens, bathrooms, and laundry rooms. You can then use air conditioners or dehumidifiers to control the humidity levels. Humidity levels tend to change throughout the day, so you need to make sure that they never rise above 50% or drop below 30%. Those levels put the humidity in a safe zone where our mucous membranes are kept moist to increase oxygen intake and stay healthy. Just make sure that you're cleaning these air conditioning systems regularly, as they can become breeding grounds for mold spores. This is especially important in certain climates like in Southeast Asia or California, for example. Up next, you should avoid placing carpets in high moisture rooms. I often see people placing small rugs in their bathrooms, but it really isn't a great idea considering how much mold thrives off of them. The basement would be another area where I would completely refrain from using carpets. If you're painting your house, it's better to use natural traditional wall paints and coverings such as lime wash paint. Natural building materials won't get moldy since lime wash is naturally antibacterial and will resist mold. Finally, you need to remember that your house is a big structure with dozens of moving parts that make things happen. With so many parts, things are bound to degrade over time. So you'll get pipes or holes letting water leak at times. It's worth doing regular safety checks to make sure your plumbing is good, as it can be a big cause for mold in your home. If something goes very wrong and you experience some flooding, make sure you deal with it as quickly as possible and dry the affected areas. After about 48 hours, mold may start creeping in and be extremely hard to get rid of. So now what happens if you already have mold in your home? Also, how do you even know if you actually do have mold in your home? There are a few ways to identify it, and one of the biggest ones is smelling a musty odor. Sometimes you might not even be able to see it, but you could be experiencing unexplainable health problems. With all that said, you need to make sure that you're getting rid of the mold as early as possible. Mold has to be tackled early, otherwise you risk an infestation. Once you've identified the mold, you'll need to look at your cleaning options. Although some general mold cleaners are effective at removing mold, many of them aren't created with the health of humans and pets in mind. Mold cleaners with these ingredients that are even hard to pronounce should be avoided because these chemicals are harmful to humans as well as the environment. I highly recommend sticking with the natural mold cleaners as they are highly effective at cleaning most mold species. With that said, make sure you are taking precautions to keep safe from whatever mold you are cleaning. You can do this by wearing gloves, a breathing mask, and goggles. Okay, here are a few best natural mold cleaners. Number 1, vinegar. Distilled white vinegar is effective at killing 80% of mold species, especially when you use it at full strength without diluting it with water. While it leaves a strong smell behind, it usually doesn't last too long. So leave the vinegar on the mold for at least an hour before scrubbing it with a brush and wiping it away with a wet cloth. Number 2, baking soda. Baking soda is great at absorbing smells and can either be used as a spray or paste for killing mold or scrubbing mold stains. To use it as a spray, add 2 tablespoons to 2 cups of water and shake the mixture so it dissolves. To create a paste, make a 50-50 solution of baking soda and water. Once the paste has dried, scrub the area with a brush. Out of those 2 options, I tend to prefer the spray due to it being easy to store and keep for future uses. I've also sometimes used it along with the next option, hydrogen peroxide. 3% hydrogen peroxide can be sprayed directly onto the mold and left for 15 minutes before you scrub and wipe the mold away with a wet cloth. Hydrogen peroxide bubbles when it comes into contact with mold, which is always very satisfying to watch. The 2 other cleaners you can use are lemon juice and tea tree oil. Lemon juice is easy to make if you have lemons lying around, and tea tree oil is just something that I recommend having in your home as it has so many uses. By this point, you might be wondering, Miriam, shouldn't I be using bleach? That's a big no from my side, and there are 2 big reasons for this. Bleach is a hazardous, corrosive substance, which is actually quite toxic for us. Peroxide and vinegar are much safer with less potent fumes. Also, mold can use bleach as a food source, causing it to multiply, and vinegar is just more effective as it penetrates porous materials while bleach does not. Okay, so we know what types of mold there are, we know how to prevent mold, and we know which cleaners to use when you find mold. The next question is, how do you actually clean mold in various areas around your house? Is there one solid method, or do things change depending on what you're cleaning? Here are a few tips for cleaning different parts of your home. Walls and interior surfaces. When dealing with walls and interior surfaces, you can use vinegar, baking soda, or tea tree oil, or a combination of the 3. As I mentioned earlier, I like to keep a spray bottle full at all times. Use that spray bottle to treat the affected areas on your walls and internal surfaces and allow it to soak for an hour. You can use a brush to scrub the area and then wipe it off with a damp cloth. In rooms that get damp often, such as the bathroom, garages, and the basements, mold will likely recur once you remove it, unless you control the moisture. The best thing you can do is to increase ventilation in these rooms by adding a fan or keeping a window open, especially while you shower and for at least 30 minutes after. My final tip here is to clean your walls and surfaces often, as that will also prevent mold growth. Number 2, appliances. Appliances tend to have smaller areas of mold growth, which are easier to treat. However, we often forget that the appliances we use every day can harbor mold, and you may not think to look for it. Washers and dryers, as well as refrigerators, come into contact with water all the time and should be cleaned often. For isolated areas of mold in these appliances, you can spray hydrogen peroxide on them and leave it to sit for 15 minutes before wiping it away. Vinegar and lemon juice would also be a good option here due to their acidic properties. On washers with extensive mold, spray undiluted vinegar onto the seal, making sure to pull it away back to expose hidden mold and scrub the affected areas. Add 2 cups of undiluted vinegar into the detergent dispenser and let your washing machine run on its hottest cycle. You'll follow that cycle with another one, but this time adding half a cup of baking soda inside the drum. Once the cycle is over, wipe the detergent tray with vinegar and leave the drum door and tray open to dry out. For coffee grinders, processors, and other food appliances, you can scrub the mold away with the baking soda paste. This will remove the mold as well as the musty odor that accompanies it. As I mentioned earlier, you can create this paste by mixing a 50-50 solution of baking soda and water and smearing it onto the mold. Leave it to dry and then scrub it off. Fabrics are mold collectors as they are porous and can stay damp for long periods. Carpets also hide mold and get wet often from spills and wet shoes, making it the perfect place for mold to grow. Sorry guys, but clothing with severe mold should be thrown away. If there's just a bit of mold, you could treat the contamination with ozone washing machine attachments, but they can be a bit pricey and not so practical to use. With that said, if your favorite shirt has a few smaller stains, you can place the clothes in a bucket of water with a cup of white vinegar and leave it to soak for 30 minutes. You can also make a paste to rub onto the areas made from lemon juice and salt. Once you've let it sit for a while, you can wash the clothes with your normal detergent on the hottest cycle recommended for the clothing. After that, make sure to dry the clothes in direct sunlight. Again, bleach is a big no-no due to all the reasons I mentioned earlier. However, another reason not to use it on fabrics is that it may discolor them. If you live in an area that gets a lot of rain or humidity, mold might be a common problem on the outside walls of your house. You may also find it in your sheds, on your outside furniture, pathway, pot plants, or on garden ornaments. To prevent mold from growing outside, cut away vines and other vegetation that are growing up against these different surfaces. To remove existing mold, spray one of the natural mold cleaners I mentioned earlier and use a stiff bristle brush to scrub it away. Let's finally move on to one of the biggest problems that can happen to you, a mold infestation. What does this mean? How bad could it be? And what do you do once you realize this is actually happening? Mold turns into an infestation if it goes unnoticed for too long and it hasn't been dealt with properly. When this happens, you can be sure that the mold you see on your walls isn't just on the surface, but inside of the walls and the structures too. When it reaches this stage, washing the mold off the walls isn't going to fix the problem. You're going to need to seek professional help. Sometimes this might mean that the structures must be torn down and rebuilt, because if the source of the mold isn't dealt with, it will just keep coming back. However, it's very important to look into different remediation companies and to ask about their remediation protocols and clearance plans so that you can choose the right options for your home. In the wrong hands, remediation can leave spaces worse than before. Mold can recur, further contamination can occur, and they can pollute your home with toxic chemicals. When finding help, I recommend looking for professionals who don't use harsh chemicals and care about the health of your family and the environment. While we looked at cleaning mold in this video, it's just one thing in your home that may be posing a big threat. You might find it in your kitchen, along with other items that are harming your health. If you want to know what those are, check out this video where I list 10 items that cause more harm than good.